Hi, and welcome again to the Live Better Connected podcast. Now, today we are talking to James Robinson from the Assembly Research, and this is about sort of the mobile industry. So, James, welcome to the Live Better Connected podcast. Firstly, could you tell us a little bit about Assembly and yourself, of course?
Sure thing. Thanks very much, Gareth. Great to be with you. Great to be on the podcast. So Assembly Research was established around 7.5 years ago. We're a modern and growing analyst firm based here in London, but very much with an international outlook, looking at the regulatory, policy and legislative developments happening in the telecoms industry and the tech sector as well. I'm one of the analyst team here based at Assembly. So contributing to our subscription research that we produce for clients, as well as bespoke custom pieces of analysis that we do. And actually, I think we're here this afternoon to discuss one of those pieces.
We're definitely here to talk about one bespoke point in particular. We commissioned a report with you, James, and you are the author of this report, looking into investment in mobile infrastructure, the UK's route to growth. So what is this about? Just tell us this sort of quicker summary of it, and we'll obviously go into a bit more detail. But what is this report about, and why do you think we commissioned it?
Well, at a high level, Gareth, I'd say that essentially the report is about outlining some of those challenges, some of those real difficult challenges facing the mobile industry at the moment, but also at the same time, those vital policy levers we think are available to the government to help try to improve the investment environment in the UK. So the study outlines those policy actions, I think urgent policy actions that we think could be taken to accelerate mobile infrastructure deployment, but not only that, to help wider objectives like the digitization of public services, as well as industrial transformation, all of which together contribute to the government's overall growth agenda.
I think that's a big part of this report is the government has very, very focused on growth, economic growth, getting people back into work, getting the economy going again. We look at the role of mobile within that. And I think one of the comments that you made very early on in the report is you said, amid the tough choices that will have to be made to deliver this growth mission, supporting mobile operators is one of the easiest. That, I think, is really sort of, for me, the main part of this report. But we have had the government in since June 2024. I think next month we're looking at nearly a year of government. And as we've said, the main policy is pushing and achieving growth. I mean, is that the right focus? And I suppose what my question would be is, what about digital infrastructure? Have they, are there words that they're making focusing on one particular industry, or do you think mobile is getting the right about a space within that policy thinking?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that we should be focusing on growth. We should be focusing on the core role that mobile infrastructure and the mobile sector at large has to play in delivering that. You're right on the kind of timing point there. I think, Gareth, it's July 2024, so pretty much 10 months today since a new government took office. It had a clear mandate to try to drive economic growth, and I think it did. Though mobile and telecoms broadly featured not too significantly in the kind of campaigning process in the run up to the election, I think it's lots of other things important things for political parties to be thinking about and campaigning on. Since taking office, the government has recognised infrastructure investment as essential to its goal to drive growth. We know that mobile connectivity is fundamental to productivity, innovation, development of emerging technologies like AI. Something that the government is betting heavily on. And the Secretary of State, Peter Carr, is a clear supporter and a proponent of AI and other digital technologies. But we think that to succeed in its mission, now is the time to prioritise support for the mobile industry as a critical enabler of growth and national competitiveness. I think, as you say, there's lots of tough choices for governments of all kinds to be had when in power, and particularly in the UK to try to deliver on this growth mission. But supporting mobile, we do think is one of the easiest things it can do. We think there's a huge number of policy levers available to it.
Well, just before we go into some of those levers, I mean, James, we mentioned some, the warm words, and you're saying the government are getting into. You said it's one of the easiest areas to support. I mean, so Chris Bryant himself said there's no route to growth without digital infrastructure, and the government has said, prior to coming in, it said it wanted a renewed push to ensure nationwide coverage by 2030. I mean, have they had opportunities to showcase that this is their priority? I wonder if we've had what have we had so far? Have we missed that, or are we going around the right way?
Well, yeah, Chris Bryant, Minister for Telecoms, has had those warm words to say. He's made, I think, an impassioned plea at Connected Britain last year for the mobile industry to work with government to help fix the foundations of the economy. But I think, getting to your point, there are opportunities that have been missed so far over this past 10 months. We've had the autumn budget, of course, and then followed up by the Chancellor's spring statement. I think neither of those made reference to the term mobile. And of course, there was no new public funding support put forward. Nothing to kind of build on the money that the government committed in the past to the shared rural network. The working paper on the 10-year infrastructure strategy, I think, again, made no mention of mobile or telecoms. And also, we've had the planning and infrastructure bill as well. I think the government has had some positive conversations and positive remarks around planning, something that I think mobile operators would be welcome to see progress on. But again, that was focused very heavily on housing and data centres. Two things that I think the country needs: housing, just for citizens, but data centres to power things like AI in the future. But both of those will need mobile connectivity. But we're not seeing anything to do with mobile included in that bill.
So the government are really focusing, as you say, on housing and data centres, but ultimately, you need connectivity as part of that, and that's it. This is a foundational enabling technology. Why is mobile so important? Why is this such a key industry to push?
Well, I think you said that the correct term right there in enabling. I think for every pound that you invest in mobile infrastructure, there's a clear economic multiplier effect. Something I think is of the scale that the government can't ignore. Operators have invested over £1.7 billion since 2019 in the rollout of 5G networks. That would have had a much more significant impact, economic value add on the wider economy. So I think that kind of really underpins, why that attention now needs to be on mobile and kind of making sure the business case is there for them to invest.
So, James, the government clearly, this is not an area that they are ignoring in digital infrastructure. They do have experience in this, and I think certainly within the fixed. So, can you tell us what they've achieved in the fixed sector?
Yeah, Gareth, I think that's very fair to say. I think the government has a proven track record in unlocking private sector investment in digital infrastructure. As you point out, that's historically been on the kind of fixed side of the market. the government published back in 2018 its Future Telecoms Infrastructure Review, outlining the kind of digital infrastructure that it wants to see develop and take shape in the UK, and the policy and regulatory initiatives that need to be put in place to enable that. Subsequently, in 2021, saw the creation of Project Gigabit, this flagship £5 billion public subsidy initiative to help drive the rollout of fibre, which up to that point had been lagging in the UK, trailing behind a lot of other European countries, trying to get that out across the UK, specifically into those areas which would be uneconomical for the commercial market. Ofcom too has been focused on that fixed side of the market through its wholesale market reviews. In 2021, with the wholesale fixed telecoms market review, trying to drive competition and investment in fibre, things that we have seen emerge, and we're expecting investment to continue over the next 5 years or more. So these kind of these players, that are key to this story, both the government and Ofcom, have played a supporting role. And it's not that we haven't seen anything at all on mobile either, with the barrier busting task force helping to reform some regulation, remove some barriers, mediate disputes to try to help with the build out of mobile infrastructure, including 5G. We've seen money being made available through the 5G testbeds and trial program, some as subsequent to the wireless infrastructure strategy as well, and then going back to the shared rural network, which the government is investing £500 million into. So there is money that has been made available. There is some progress that has been made, but that amount of money is a fraction of the total spend being invested by the state into the fixed side of things. And we think there's now a time for the government to go further and faster on the mobile front and really prioritise it as this enabler of growth and competitiveness for the UK.
And I think it's that policy shift that is so key to this report. By all metrics, fixed line communications and connectivity across the country have achieved many of the sort of targets they wanted to. And some would say if we get to where mobile is, we're almost there before that government sort of intervention, of government assistance. But why is it, why is it the mobile industry? What's the challenges facing them at the moment? Why is it that there a need to sort of engage with government to make the investment environment into mobile in the UK better than it currently is?
Yes, as I think you're kind of alluding to, the mobile industry has invested significant amounts over recent years, also making money available to try to ensure that the social and economic benefits of that investment is felt by all, with its kind of digital inclusion programming at the same time. But mobile's connectivity is obviously becoming more crucial than ever. It's being demanded to even greater and greater heights, and expectations are greater from end users as well. The kind of real challenge, as we see it, is kind of despite all that investment taking place, retail revenues have been decreasing. That obviously impacts operators' ability and probably incentive as well to invest. Those top line trends actually accelerated since 2018, around the same time when that 5G investment cycle began to take off. Subscriptions also rising at that same time. The retail revenues falling, ARPU declining at the same time as mobile consumption going up. And actually, if you compare what's going on in mobile to a number of other sectors, the amount the households pay for their mobile services is very small, and actually has been declining according to Ofcom numbers as well. So that investment is continuing. The kind of financial headwinds are only ramping up. There's been the cost operators have had to shoulder, to comply with provisions of the Telecommunications Security Act.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, to put some numbers onto that, the Telecom Security Act, which asked the industry to essentially remove a supplier from security basis, was around a 2.2 to £3 billion cost to the industry. And like you say, the amount that the households pay, I think in your report is 1.6% of their household income, with actual amount average payments declining in real terms from £15 to £11. So from an industry perspective, we're doing more with less, but yet being asked equally all the time to, extend coverage, bring in 5G standalone now. So there's a lot of sort of, let's say, the shoulders are there, and then equally digital exclusion is a big issue for this government. And I think in your report, you make some really interesting points of how much the industry already provides. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, in addition to, just investing in, the ongoing extension, upgrade, maintenance of mobile infrastructure, there's that significant amount going into social programming to try to help people who are facing certain kind of accessibility and affordability challenges. Social tariffs is one area that we see operators providing voluntary support in. That's happening on the fixed side of things as well, but increasingly 5G social tariffs being provided at a kind of a low cost, discounted offers to try to help people be able to access vital mobile services. And if you kind of add all of those things up over the past few years, I think the past 3 or 4 years, we've totaled a contribution of £320 million being provided by industry to essentially try to ensure people don't lose out, don't fall through the cracks, and are able to access those important mobile connectivity services and devices too.
Yeah, so I think, looking forward, there's got to be a balance. There's only a finite amount the industry has to invest, and equally in the support it provides. I mean, we're obviously, it's very clear in this report that, you make the case for the government looking into the mobile sector, shifting its policy focus. But you've also looked at sort of elsewhere, not just the UK, and some case in Australia updating its, I think it's the low impact facilities determination to streamline the rules for telecoms. You also looked a bit into Europe as well.
Yeah, we did. I think, some of the issues and debates that we're talking about here on this podcast, while focusing on the UK, are not unique to this market. They're happening elsewhere. Given how other governments all around the world view that critical nature of mobile connectivity to their own economies. So we see that debate happening in the EU, and questions and discussions around how you drive that investment in 5G that will have that kind of knock-on effect for growth and indeed competitiveness. Competitiveness is that real singular objective that I think the Commission is trying to pursue at the moment. They've published things like the Digital Infrastructure White Paper. We've had some very high-profile reports published by former Italian prime ministers, Mario Draghi and Enrico Letta, which are, I think, kind of serving as a bit of a playbook for the Commission as it thinks about all the regulatory and policy reforms that it might look to implement to try to boost investment and growth in turn. So facing a lot of the similar challenges, I think, particularly in Europe, to what we're doing in the UK. But I think I would argue that they're at this stage, a little bit more progressed in their thinking and debates than we are here now. I think there's a lot that's currently on the table that in the past in a previous life, when we were part of the EU, we would have automatically benefited from. Some reforms around spectrum policy, and a number of other key areas, perhaps to try to remove or eliminate barriers to network rollout, that now obviously we are or operators or industry in the UK is not going to benefit from, as I say. But there's things that we could look at that are happening that we should be alive to that might.
Well, I was going to say, within your report, you've taken a look at a couple of those issues. I think, as you say, interestingly, a lot of Italian prime ministers seem to be coming to the fore on this one. But two areas I thought were interesting you raised in there, and equally came through to the recommendations within the report as well, were annual licence fees and net neutrality. I wondered if you could expand on that.
Both live debates, I think, here in the UK and potentially in Europe as well. I think annual license fees, essentially, to my mind, serve as a tax on the industry. They reduce returns and they make it more difficult to justify network investment. I think here we're seeing Ofcom positively take a look at how those might be able to rationalise, how it might be able to update its thinking about what they should be, and has proposed for those to be reduced.
I think just to be fair to Ofcom on this point, I think they have proposed a £40 million reduction. But does that go far enough? Is there opportunities, for instance, as you say, if it's a tax on businesses, rather than sort of just taking that out of the sector? If the sector is to look and invest in uneconomic areas, then they can retain some of those funds potentially.
The fees that are raised, is money that's essentially channeled to the Treasury, and I think potentially for some less economically impactful outcomes than could be delivered if it was money that was being able to be repurposed and used by industry specifically for mobile investment. I think that would align with the government's ambitions in the wireless infrastructure strategy. I think it would align with its own growth agenda as well. And I think it's something that could be done with by fostering investment without necessarily undermining any sort of Ofcom responsibilities to spectrum, and ensuring a kind of efficient and effective use of that. I think we see some debates around spectrum pricing and spectrum fees taking place in Australia, a country that you mentioned, and we see a lot around spectrum license fees and auctions, at the centre of discussions in Europe as well. So clearly a focus of policymakers in a number of markets. I think net neutrality is, again, that's another very interesting area that's on the minds of operators. Back in October 2023, what's that, a year and a half ago now, Gareth, we saw Ofcom revise its guidance in this area. I think something that was broadly welcomed by industry in the UK, and provided some additional clarity on what they're allowed to do or not allowed to do. But I think Ofcom also indicated in that review that some of the outcomes that it's seen to date might have been the same as if it only had a sort of principle-based, maybe lighter touch framework in place compared to the kind of regime it has in place now. Any wider legislative change in this area would be a matter for government to look into. And I think kind of with Ofcom, suggesting as such, I think it's provides a good opportunity now for the government to go ahead and explore that issue in greater detail, see if there's scope to offer greater flexibility or promote competition and new partnerships that might deliver new services.
So obviously within the report you have made some recommendations, and we've seen what they've made elsewhere in other countries, or the discussions or debates that are going on. I'd be keen to understand some of those recommendations that you've made, James.
Yeah, we have outlined 8 in total. We think these are all policy areas that would fall within the government's scope to influence. Some would potentially have an immediate impact. Some maybe would have an impact over the medium term. But they're all things that we think would make the conditions in this country more conducive to investment, and we think that then would have an economic impact, a positive economic impact for the country at the macro level. So as we touched on ALFs, some sort of kind of repurposing in that area to make sure those are being used for the most productive option. We came to net neutrality, and we think there's now a case for the government to consider whether it might evolve that regime further. A couple more I'd just pick up on. I won't go into all of them, Gareth, but we've heard some positive words around planning. Unfortunately, not in the planning and infrastructure bill itself. But one of the government's priorities has been, to try to reform outdated planning rules, to try to get Britain building. But I think there's a bit of a lack of attention so far to removing those barriers to mobile infrastructure deployments, and kind of this flagship policy being focused elsewhere. So some kind of missed opportunities.
And it's worth mentioning on the planning, James, this is a national thing, and obviously we have devolved planning as well. So this is a national critical, what we would call CNI, critical national infrastructure. So if we want to ensure that people are keen to invest in this industry, this needs to be something that can be built across the whole of the UK.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And the UK as a whole is becoming reliant on these these services provided by the mobile industry. And so I think across the board, the government would do well to expedite revisions to planning regulations. A lot of these are actually predate the 5G era. And so making those reforms, which we think are necessary, would help, though, create the right conditions to unlock investment, embolden operators to commit to further deployment of infrastructure that helps extend coverage and meet the rising demands of consumers and businesses across.
And bring about that economic multiplier effect that you've spoken about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In turn, deliver that over the coming years. I think, going back to the point around focus and attention being on fixed, that maybe hasn't yet happened on the mobile side of things. A business rates holiday is a temporary business rates holiday is something I'd bring up. That's one of our recommendations. We know several years ago the government gave this sort of relief to builders of new fibre infrastructure for a period of time. That's even in England and Wales, and that's even longer for those providers in Scotland. I think enacting this kind of similar support for mobile operators would be something they would consider particularly beneficial, trying to alleviate some of the existing financial burdens and free up extra resources for investment in 5G, which could even be targeted to those less economically viable areas. We're not saying in this report that would be any sort of a tax rebate for operators that government would need to shoulder the burden on, but it's really a temporary relief to try to provide that capex stimulus that then, as you say, would have that longer economic benefits down the line.
And that could be particularly beneficial in areas which are uneconomic. If we're talking about rural areas, digital inclusion, where the connectivity isn't already. It's about making those areas that might not be at the top of the queue, let's say for investment, making them more viable economically. Because ultimately, this is about sustainable business models.
Absolutely, anything that could be done, to really ensure that there's no widening of any digital divide. We want to see investment happening across the board. I'm sure operators do as well. But there are some areas that are just more difficult to invest in commercially than others. But there'll be those areas where the kind of economic value to the country of good, high quality mobile connectivity being there is greater to the economic value to operators themselves. And I think these are those particular locations where the government has a very important role to play. I think one more of the recommendations and the policy levers we've identified that I would raise, Gareth, is around the PSTI Act, the Product Security and Telecommunications Infrastructure Act, as I'm sure you well know. So something that received royal assent in December 22 comes in kind of two parts. Essentially, the first part was all around this new security regime for smart products, which has been implemented. It's come into effect about a year ago. But there's a second half of that act, which kind of feel that the government is potentially dragging its feet on a little bit, and we see scope for some kind of immediate action in this area. It's something that it's already received royal assent, as I mentioned. It's already kind of partially on that statute book. But the second half of it, part two, which is all about the rights of operators to install, maintain, and use and share telecoms infrastructure, I should add, has not yet been implemented. So I think this is something that could be particularly beneficial to operators to try to accelerate the deployment and expansion of mobile and gigabit capable fixed infrastructure across the UK. I think the government's previously stated that it would proceed with that when parliamentary time allows. So kind of not committing to a date when that was going to happen. Obviously, we've had a change of government kind of since then, since the Act was adopted. But I think the time to get that done has now come, essentially. I think the government's got an express commitment that it's made to tearing down the barriers to growth. And I think it is time that it kind of took those provisions forward without delay, and put an end to some of the legal uncertainties that have arisen in the interim as well.
I think that's key here. It's adding stability and certainty into the system. And if we're looking for investment, we're looking to ensure that we can bring this to the whole country. Certainty is important, and having something that is already on the statute book, not fully implemented after 2 years. I think if the government wants to show willing, that is very key.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the rollout of digital infrastructure, whether we're talking fixed broadband or mobile services, having that certainty, that kind of stability in the policy and regulatory framework is paramount to give operators the confidence to invest. There's a number of actions, I think, as we've outlined in this piece, that could contribute to that. And as we're trying to emphasise now, 10 months into or 10 months since taking office, there's some progress that we'd like to see happen. I think it's only reasonable to apply a little bit of pressure to the government at this time.
Excellent. And one of the final recommendations I feel important is equally, you've mentioned planning reform, but digital champions is one of the recommendations, and that's about having the right resources within the planning system. If we want to ensure that this industry can continue to invest, but I would also hasten to add other industries which are equally, things like the water industry, the energy industry, the EV charging industry. We've got a lot coming through the planning system. So ensuring that it is well resourced and has the right people with the right skills is very important as well, and something that Mobile UK itself has championed across and with local government across the country. So I think there's a lot to go in, and as you say, to learn from other countries as well. So I mean, look, I think that your report is really fascinating. I think everyone should get a read of it. We'll have very much through this, have a link to that report. It will equally be on your website and our website. I mean, thank you, James. It's been a fascinating discussion today. Lots to learn. It's been great to have you on the podcast. So for everyone else who's listening at the moment, please do remember to like and subscribe. We will be putting out more podcasts throughout the year on many different subjects, we'll be seeing you soon. So thank you all.